Hi, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. This is the meeting of the Just Transition Working Group under the Climate Change Commission. I'm really excited to have everyone here today. This is our first hybrid meeting and second meeting of this year of this working group. And we are, my name is Cindy Osordo. I'm a policy analyst of the Climate Change Program at MDE, and we'll get started. Next slide, please.
Seems that someone's raised their hand. Sorry.
So this is the agenda for today. We are going to be going over some introductions and updates. We're going to do a recap of the first meeting and our deliverables. We'll be doing highlights from the state plan. Then we'll do some overall just transition approaches and principles. Then we'll have two presentations from two of our members. And finally, we'll end with discussion.
Yeah.
So we'll do a roll call of all the members.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Vo. I'm the Maryland Program Coordinator at the University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability. I'll be going through the list of members that we have one by one. Whether you are a member or not, feel free to put your name, organization, and email in the chat so everyone knows who's in the room. But going down the list, Senator Dawn Guile. Senator John Moutz.
Carrie Doyle sitting in for Senator Moutz. Thank you.
Delegate Regina Boyce. Delegate David Fraser Hidalgo.
Here.
Cindy Osoto.
Here.
Chanel Viator. Allison Bretnother. Here. Richard Strong. Jason Asher.
Here.
Rico Albuquerque. Donna S. Edwards. Gerald Jackson. Jerry R. Williford Jr. Sean Streiser. Casey Ross.
Here.
Ryan Trolley.
Here.
Stephanie Johnson.
Here.
Moira Cyphers. Aaron Appel. Brad Phillips. Lynn Nash. Kimberly Haven. Jennifer Walsh.
I'm here.
Suzanne Makowski.
Here.
Kobe Little. Tiffany Fisher. Larry Shiflett.
Here.
John Hines. Anya Terrell.
Available here.
Thank you. We do have some new membership updates.
Sorry, there was a comment in the chat. There was someone that tuned in. Sean Streiser is also here.
Okay. Thank you. We have two new members joining us this meeting, who are representatives of the building and construction trade industry selected by the Baltimore DC Metro Building and Construction Trades Council. That is Jason Asher with the Mid-Atlantic Pipe Trades and Rico Albuquerque's from IBEW Local 26. Another change in our membership, Victoria Leonard with the Baltimore Washington Laborers District Council has retired. So we will be trying to fill that seat. And then one last thing, after this meeting, we'll be sending around a post-meeting feedback survey to get your feedback on previous meetings, as well as some ideas for recommendations.
And it looks like Rico Albuquerque is here as well.
Great, thank you so much, Stephanie. So we'll begin with our presentation. And anyone who is not a member is also welcome to just put your name, organization, and email in the chat. We are very excited to have you joining us. So the recap of the first meeting is that we went over the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan. The Climate Solutions Now Act of 2022 created a wide array of new priorities for the state, including new working groups of the Climate Change Commission, and this is one of them. Another big piece of the Climate Solutions Now Act was the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan that our agency put out in December, and these are the goals by law. It's 60% by 2031 compared to 2006 levels, reach net zero emissions by 2045, and to create net economic benefits for the state. I will not be going over the details. You can always check out the report. Next slide, please. The main highlights regarding the plan as it relates to this working group is that we as a state care about having a just transition. We will be transitioning away from coal and other fossil fuels for electricity generation due to a wide variety of different factors. That includes our law, but that also includes market forces. Maryland is also interested in building new clean and renewable energy industries. That includes offshore wind. And we in Maryland will be supporting our workers equitably across sectors. That includes green and sustainable sectors in energy, transportation, and natural working lands. So what do the economic benefits look like? That means across the board, we expect to see new jobs being created as a result of our decarbonization policies and approaches. That means engineers, that means architects, lawyers, energy managers, construction managers, project planners, financial analysts, water and waste specialists, solar project managers. We expect a wide array of various industries being impacted by decarbonization work, and that's part of the conversation today. You'll be hearing more about the energy efficiency space in particular today. The other piece that I wanted to have you as members focus on is that this working group will be developing recommendations for the consideration of the Climate Change Commission, as well as a study to the Governor and General Assembly. So we need to provide written recommendations, and you can check out the report from last year, the 2023 annual report, for the recommendations that were approved and made it to the Governor and General Assembly. These do get considered for legislation. I did go over a few examples during the first meeting of legislation that had been impacted, that had been influenced by the recommendations that were included in the 2023 report. And we are encouraging all of the members to begin thinking about submitting ideas for this group to vote on. And we will be beginning that discussion in August and finalizing around September. really, we need to be submitting to the, it says October, we'll probably be having to submit around September. So the next few months will be critical for this deliverable. We will be taking ideas, and as Stephanie mentioned, you'll be getting a survey after this meeting to begin thinking about how to do that. The other main deliverable for this working group is a study to the governor and General Assembly. You can see the letter of the law. It says it must include job creation, skills and training needed, workforce disruptions, and strategies for targeted workforce development. I did want to provide an update on where we stand. So back in December, MDE submitted a application to the U.S. Climate Alliance, one of our nonprofit partners, for a grant, and we are going to be awarded this grant to do this study. And the lead contractor will be the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We are really excited to be working with them, and we just need to finalize the final contractual pieces, but the thinking is around next meeting, we'll either within the next couple of months or so, we'll have them come on and speak about some of the study design components and just do an introduction to how they're approaching the study to this working group. And we'll be providing updates as we move along. Does anyone have any questions regarding the two deliverables that I just mentioned, if you're a member? No questions? All right. So we are working under Governor Moore's administration, and in 2024, just this year, our governor released the first state plan in about 10 years. And in this state plan, he outlined his priorities across the board. And these are the top 10 priorities that he has. He is calling on all of our state agencies, including MDE, to leave no one behind. This includes ending child poverty, setting students up for success, an equitable, robust, competitive economy, connecting Marylanders to jobs, creating safer communities, making Maryland a desirable and affordable home for our residents. I'm not going to go through all of the list, but I bolded here the top 5 that I think are in connection with this working group, and that's supporting our students, a competitive economy, jobs, making Maryland a leader in clean energy and the greenest state in the country, and finally, making Maryland a state of service. So here we put together some guiding principles for the consideration of the working group, not just for this meeting, but as we move forward with our work. These were influenced by our readings from the United Nations, from how other states have approached just transition, just from a wide variety of materials. And these are generally some of the guiding recurring principles that we've seen in this relatively new area of a just transition, which is quality, clean job creation, occupational training and education, promoting investment in clean jobs and impacted communities, identifying and eliminating structural barriers to employment, hiring and retraining underrepresented workers, as well as retaining underrepresented workers, and finally collaborating with stakeholders, especially with an emphasis on the workers themselves. So Now we are going to be turning over to our first presentation that is being led by Mr. Ryan Trolley from CivicWorks. Please note that we will be holding, well, up to you, but we will be inviting questions and would you like to do it along the way or at the end?
I can take questions, you know, as they come, if folks put them in the chat. I'm not sure I'll be able to see them, but whatever makes sense. I'm flexible. All right, I'll get on there. Looks like it's
Kind of bleeding over a bit, but I can't seem to fix that.
that it's showing 2 slides
Yeah.
at once.
Yes, it is.
We only see one slide on the screen for,
Oh, you're only seeing one? Okay.
oh, actually, no, it's scrolling down a little bit.
It's because it's a PDF.
Okay,
So
okay.
it's like a slide and a half. That I can work with that. All good. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, fellow members of the Just Transition Working Group. My name is Ryan Trolley. I'm a business development specialist with CivicWorks. I will be talking with you today about our community engagement and energy and efficiency programming and best practices. This is, of course, in the context of the theme of today's meeting, which is existing efforts in these spaces. So I will talk to you about some of our current programming and plans for future programming. So next slide, the personal introduction. As I said, Ryan Trolley, business development specialist with CivicWorks. In my role, I support business line development for CivicWorks' energy programs team. So my projects have included our electrification pilots and programming, as well as the launch of a roofing job training program. And we are continuing to plan around the launch of an in-house roofing social enterprise. Beyond that, I have some other cross-programmatic responsibilities on our Center for Sustainable Careers side and across the organization. Next slide. Quick overview of what we'll discuss today. Just going to talk to you broadly about CivicWorks, our model and approach. Then I'll zero in a little bit on what we do on the energy programs team. And then I will talk to you about our Center for Sustainable Careers. And that'll be what we discussed today. Next slide. So a lot of text on this slide. I try and avoid that, but for the mission statements, we'll run through them. So broadly speaking, CivicWorks is a nonprofit serving Baltimore and the surrounding area for over 30 years. The overall mission of the organization is to strengthen communities and promote equity for people of all ages through education, skills development, and community service. So a lot of different programs under that CivicWorks banner. For our purposes today, we'll focus on our Center for Sustainable Careers, which has a mission to expand access to family-sustaining careers for Baltimore residents facing systemic inequity. Additionally, we support those residents in building the skills needed to secure quality employment. And then on the employer side, we work with them around investing in their workers and meeting job quality standards in their practices from an equity perspective. And our energy programs team that works collaboratively with our Center for Sustainable Careers, the mission there is to make it easy and affordable for low-income residents of Baltimore and the surrounding counties to make home energy upgrades that reduce their energy bills, make the home healthier, and reduce climate impact. Next slide. This is a visual showing the integrated model between our Center for Sustainable Careers and our energy programs team. So on the Center for Sustainable Careers side, you have construction training programs, and we have training programs or graduates then being placed with local contractors. On the energy program side, we're doing weatherization and other home improvement work. We are subcontracting a significant amount of that out to local contractors. So that allows us to build deep relationships with our contractor partners. So it can work either way. Perhaps we have a contractor that we work with on the energy program side. And in working with them, we, determine that they're interested in job placement opportunities from the Center for Sustainable Careers side, or vice versa. But it allows us to build deep relationships with these contractors, build trust, and then with that trust, we can work with them around job quality standards and equity. Next slide. Another visual here. This one is a little more specific to what we do on the Center for Sustainable Careers side. So this is kind of the pathway that a trainee coming into one of our training tracks, this is what their pathway looks like. So front end, you have recruitment and screening. We have skills testing to assess that, they are able to proceed in the program. From there, you're going to go to job readiness training. This is sort of our industry agnostic suite of like personal and professional development training. From there, they are going to advance to industry-specific certifications and hands-on instruction specific to what they're being trained in. And then I have on-the-job training circled because that intersects with the energy program side. So energy program staff, we have the capacity because we are doing some of this energy efficiency work to provide internal on-the-job training to some trainees coming through programming on the training side. So we like having that flexibility in working with trainees. Some trainees are ready for direct placement upon completion of a program. Others benefit from additional support, additional time with us. It's a good option for trainees, maybe with higher barriers. We can perhaps be more forgiving for a period of time with them than an external employer might be. And so whether it's on-the-job training or direct placement, we then have graduation, ultimately job placement. And then a thing to note is that we track retention for 2 years post-graduation. And for the duration of these programs, these trainees have access to wraparound case management services, which I will talk about more a little bit later. But we make a significant investment in these trainees. Next slide, please. This is just another visual kind of attesting to the model. I think we've covered it pretty well, but the intersection of classroom and hands-on training, on-the-job training, and what we do on the energy program side, and then employer job quality and equity. Next slide. I want to touch on a couple principles that are, we highly value as an organization. So one is community-based outreach. We have a team of community outreach coordinators that serve as trusted community messengers. They educate residents where they are at community events, meetings, and other community-based channels. We also get a ton of word-of-mouth referrals. We've been around for a long time, so when people proceed through our programming, they tell their friends, their neighbors, their family. So we really value those word-of-mouth referrals. And we also support sort of a peer-to-peer social marketing approach with energy captains and neighborhood ambassadors. Next slide. Another key value is trying to operate as a one-stop shop for resource navigation. So this is applicable across CivicWorks, but is specifically relevant to what we do on energy programs. So we have energy advisors. When somebody talks to a community outreach coordinator at an event, signs up for services, they're going to be contacted by an energy advisor who is going to guide them through onboarding, project implementation, and post-project, and remain available as a resource. So the goal there is to be able to qualify customers for multiple programs and braid funding sources into a single streamlined process. We want to be able to, as seamlessly as possible, manage complex multi-step home decarbonization projects and have that energy advisor available throughout the process. Next slide, please. This is, I'm going to dig in a little bit more into what we do on the energy program side now. So this is a graphic kind of showing you our suite of programming. So typically the first step for a client is going to be that quick energy install appointment. So that is a briefer appointment when CivicWorks staff will come out, install some energy efficient bulbs, switch to energy efficient shower heads and faucets, and talk with the homeowner for a little while about some, additional opportunities and general energy education. From there, we want to go ahead and conduct a full energy audit in the home. So we want to, do pollutant testing on their various appliances in the home. We want to do the blower door test, all of that. And from there, we want to go ahead and do the weatherization work we can do for them to, improve the home. And simultaneously, we want to assess them for additional programming opportunities they may qualify for, be that electrification or rooftop solar. I'll also note at the bottom here, these are common, issues that we might encounter in a home that we try and leverage funds to address so that we can proceed with other work, whether that's roofing repair or electrical work, be it a panel upgrade or removing outdated wiring, and of course, addressing moisture and mold issues, which are very common.
Next slide.
Next slide, please.
The slides
Thank
are
you.
now fully showing, by the way.
Oh, cool. Okay. Magic.
Sorry about that. See why we're not. Which one was it? Shit. There we go.
There we
Sorry
go.
about
Thank you. So I'll just talk briefly about our solar programming. This is really centered around our Baltimore Shines program, which is a rooftop solar program for low and moderate income Baltimore City residents. This also correlates with a solar panel installer job training program on the training side. Baltimore Shines just is concluding its pilot phase. We have installed rooftop solar on 17 homes. This is a collaborative program with Baltimore City, the Maryland Energy Administration. We do have funding in place for phase 2, in which we will provide rooftop solar for 200 homes over the next 2 years. And if someone does not qualify for Shines, we do look at what other solar opportunities they may qualify for, whether that's a solar co-op model or the community solar model. Next slide.
Hi, Ryan. Is the EPA solar for all money going to support Baltimore Shines, or is that going to a different program?
That is not directly going to Baltimore Shines.
Okay.
There might be, I'm not exactly sure what the latest, we were not an awardee for that. If there's further opportunities to pursue that going forward, that, is probably of interest, but no, it's not currently. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about our electrification efforts, which have so far kind of taken the shape of a few pilot programs. Broadly speaking, in terms of our goals with electrification is, we want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We want to improve indoor air quality, especially for vulnerable populations. So seniors, families with small children, those with pre-existing conditions. There is a lot of science, a lot of studies that have established the link between gas appliances in the living space, especially gas stoves, and health issues, general respiratory issues, and the link with childhood asthma is especially, concerning and a major issue. Then, of course, we also want to increase the energy efficiency of the home. We want to enhance public awareness and education of electrification and decarbonization. A lot of people have I find, have a relatively intuitive understanding of what these ideas are, but they don't always know the terminology, so we're trying to, make people aware of these concepts and understand how what they do in their home can have sort of broader positive impacts. And then, of course, we also, in doing these pilots, want to deepen our own internal understanding and capacity of residential electrification retrofits, enhance our ability to do this work. Next slide, please. So currently we have a couple pilots ongoing. They are very similar in structure. We have one in Baltimore City that is funded by the Able Foundation, so private foundation funding. And we have one that is in Howard County, that is a collaboration with the Howard County Office of Community Sustainability. In both of these pilots, we are replacing gas stoves with electric induction stoves in low or moderate income households in these areas. And we are prioritizing clients based on some of those criteria I mentioned previously in terms of being seniors or families with small children or households where someone has a health condition of some kind. Next slide.
When you make those transitions with induction stoves, are you bringing in the stove? Are you doing the electrical?
Yeah.
Heavy up if you need to? And
Yeah.
what are you doing about pots and pans afterward?
I will tell you if pop it to the next slide.
Sorry.
And no, you're good. That
Oh, there you
is exactly.
Sorry.
So when that client gets that stove, we're covering all the costs associated with it. We are removing the gas stove. We are providing them with a free induction stove / convection oven appliance. We're covering all of the costs associated with this process for delivery, installation, removal of the old appliance. In terms of the installation specifics you mentioned, yes, we are capping the gas line. We're running a new circuit from the panel to the stove location. In some cases, we are doing heavy up panel upgrades. We have done a couple of those in the Baltimore City pilot, and we anticipate doing a couple in the Howard County pilot. We also, a few of those clients have had situations where they actually had an electrical panel that had an outstanding recall on it. So one, we want to get that panel out of there, but it's also a good opportunity to go ahead and go through the process of doing a panel upgrade. It also, of course, is going to prepare those clients for adds value to the home and prepares those clients for additional electrification work down the road. And yes, we are providing them with a new set of induction compatible cookware. We go out and have conversations with these clients educationally around like how the new appliance will work. And we also provide them with a stipend for pilot participation, as we are kind of, especially with panel upgrades, it can be a multi-step process. We are going, in and out of the home on a few different occasions and also doing pollutant testing. So a stipend for their participation. Yes, sir.
So of all of the things that are included with this, do you guys have an average cost associated with that?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you rough numbers based on the contractor we've worked with for these current pilots. So if we are not doing a panel upgrade, if we are just putting in the new circuit, capping the gas line, straightforward installing it, that project is probably only going to be, not including the price of the stove itself, the project will probably be $3,000 or so. Yeah, the cost of the stove, those range considerably, but the pricing also fluctuates. You can find some really good deals on good stoves. So you can do those projects $5,000 all in. When you start looking at panel upgrades, it gets considerably more expensive. $10K, $12K, $13K, and that's situations that we have kind of prioritized as good fits on the basis of not having to do or spend a ton of budgeting on like drywall work and stuff. These are homes that are kind of have unfinished basements or are optimal in some way for doing this. So I imagine it could get significantly higher.
So, I mean, I guess, is there like a standard that determines whether or not you actually replace the panel or not? Is it like current voting codes?
So again, these are pilot programs, so we don't really have like an organizational standard. We basically deferred to our subcontractor partner on these installs. For the two clients that had panels that had a recall, we were very much inclined to go ahead and replace that panel and simultaneously do the upgrade. We also talk with the clients about like, what are your other gas appliances? How far into their life cycle are other gas appliances in your home? Is additional electrification work potentially of interest? These are all things that we would factor in. But otherwise, we're kind of deferring to recommendations from the subcontractor, just in terms of available capacity, space and capacity on the panel.
What is the typical cost of a stovetop? Is it?
Oh, like the induction stoves? Yeah.
Like,
So you can get, so it's like a range, right? So an induction stovetop with a convection oven, like typical.
oh, and all in one, okay.
Yeah. We haven't been doing like installs at the cooktops. We've been doing, it's like a range appliance like you would
Okay.
typically have in your home. I mean, there are some that are around, $1,200 and they go upwards to $4,000 depending on brand name, features,
Size, that kind of-
size, and the inventory changes a lot. In my experience, it's like what's available at any given time is changing month to month.
Are there more and more manufacturers? Are the prices overall coming down or?
Yeah, I would,
So if you go into Home Depot or Lowe's, like you look and there's maybe one.
yeah, there's like, that's been a challenge in terms of identifying models that we think are a good fit for clients too, because it's challenging to figure out, like, it'd be helpful if I could see these in person and test them out in some way. Yes, so generally, most of the major manufacturers have kind of a suite of induction ranges that, like, I was just purchasing some for Howard County recently, and they were all under $2,000, all between $15K and $2,000. Now, these were Samsung or LG, so not General Electric. That's going to be a little higher, but brands that seemingly have good reputations and get good reviews on these appliances.
Do you try to buy American-made products?
It hasn't been a policy specifically in the context of these pilots, just in terms of scale. I honestly don't know. I don't think it really historically has been a primary consideration. I think it's usually like,
What's cheapest?
what's going to be best, what's pricing wise is viable, and also what's going to be a good fit for the client.
We had a question in the chat. What is the average stipend for participating homeowners?
We have been giving them, how much was it? Most recently, $1,000. We've been giving, it was big. Well, in retrospect, we ended up doing less pollutant testing than we anticipated in the home. So it actually wasn't quite as, the work was often not as invasive as we thought. So maybe, I would say that's a fairly generous stipend, but yeah, that's what it's been.
There's a follow-up question up front or over a period of time?
At the conclusion of the process. So it's basically like, this is what you are being provided with upon completion of this process with us. In addition, of course, to the stove and the cookware.
There's a question in online. Someone had been holding their hand for a little while.
Sure.
And the previous question came from Dr. Kayla Fleming, a participant. Thank you, Kayla, for joining us. Rico?
Yes, hello, thank you. Apologies, I'm on the road, so I don't have my camera on. I'm working from my cell phone. I was just curious, is there any kind of competitive procurement process for the contractor you're working with to make sure those prices are good prices for the organization? And then are any CivicWorks graduates being used in the actual install itself?
So on the first part of your question, with these being pilots, we didn't necessarily go through, it was the contractor we have a contractor vetting process. This contractor went through that vetting process. In terms of once we started looking at the estimates and quotes, I did get feedback from a few other contractor partners, and I did also speak with Rewiring America, a nonprofit in the electrification space, kind of a leader, industry leader, and they have some tools for kind of assessing pricing. We did find, to be frank, I think the pricing for the contractor we're working with on these pilots is probably on the higher end of the range, but we are also paying them a little more because they're functioning as a general contractor for this work. So they're coordinating the plumbing component of it, as well as the electrical, as well as any aesthetic work. So we've been satisfied with their work. It's not a commitment that we've made beyond the scope of these pilots. As we look at future electrification programming, I think we'll be thinking about kind of casting a wider net, thinking about contractor partners for this work, and probably having a few different contractors that we're working with specifically on this type of project. Is there a second part that I didn't answer?
Are CivicWorks participants working on the projects as well?
Not on these electrification, not on like, so when someone on the energy programs team, if there's a trainee who is doing on-the-job training with our energy programs team, they would probably, typically that's going to look like they're going out on kind of the front end of this process. So they'd be working with an energy auditor who's going into the home. They'd be working with the staff member who's doing the quick install appointments. So it's sort of like a general support role for that part of the process. We don't have someone doing training on these specific installations. Although long-term, we are interested in kind of expanding our in-house capacity to probably have like an electrician on staff, an HVAC technician on staff. And then in theory, there's a pathway where we could have some kind of small scale apprenticeship pathways for someone in working with that person, but that's further down the road.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Good.
Just real quick, so you said that you wound up doing less pollutant testing. I mean, isn't kind of the purpose is to reduce pollutants?
Well,
address all the things.
The thing about, there's a few things about it. So nitrogen dioxide is meant to get a good reading on that. You have to measure in parts per billion in terms of the levels in a home. Some of the devices, there are like consumer grade monitors for that, but they're like accuracy is not like tested very well. This was sort of, so we do our standard like carbon monoxide testing, standard testing we do in the execution of an energy audit, but we're not doing quite as extensive testing as we thought we would be doing. The other thing is like CivicWorks is an implementation oriented organization. There's a lot of great organizations doing the studies and the science-based, you know, the harder science around pollutant measurement. And there's a lot of things we can reference for that. It's just not necessarily our totally within our sphere. And the other thing is it's the question of value also, because what you're talking about is it's like you're looking, so it's like here's a device that was previously releasing pollutants into the home. Now we know that it's not, we've replaced it. So it's like all you're kind of measuring is like what the levels were at previously. So we're getting carbon monoxide, but we're just not getting the carbon dioxide measurement. Because ultimately, you know, you're just kind of zeroing that out on the basis of it being an induction stove. And so thinking to the future, our goal for future programming is whole home decarbonization retrofits. We want to address those foundational health and safety issues in the home that we already talked about, do that weatherization and energy efficiency work, do whole home electrification retrofits. So that would include the stoves. Heat pumps are, you know, a major focus for us going forward. We are, you know, working on moving forward with projects in that space. Electric clothes dryers, heat pump water heaters or other electric water heaters. And then of course, if that can be paired with solar, that's going to be a great value for these homeowners. Next slide, please.
There was a quick question from Jared. Is there a potential for a relationship with range manufacturers to get ranges for less than retail?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so as we scale up this programming. Yeah, I mean, right now we have, like a contractor account with Home Depot. So we get discounts on that and you get discounts as you buy more. But in terms of a direct manufacturer relationship or something along those lines, I think certainly as we scale up, there would be opportunity for that. But in this case, it's a smaller number of stoves, so.
Thank you.
This is just a visual showing some of the tax credits that are already available to you. If you're interested in electrification or solar in your home, of course, there are very significant electrification rebates forthcoming from the Inflation Reduction Act that are rolling out through our state energy agency, the Maryland Energy Administration. We anticipate those becoming available to consumers in 2025. I encourage you to check out Rewiring America's IRA calculator, some of their other resources if you are interested in making any of these changes in your home and want to see what you qualify for. Next slide. And then how this connects to our workforce development goals. So one, a few things I want to highlight. We think there's an opportunity here so we have this pool of energy auditors already in Maryland. So can we harness our existing workforce of energy auditors to be able to conduct electrification audits in the home? So CivicWorks has already piloted an electrification auditor cohort in conjunction with Energy Score, which is an organization we've worked with on training in energy auditing a lot over the years. That curriculum was based on the Building Performance Institute's principles for conducting electrification audits. We hope to do more of that kind of thing. We also think there's an opportunity here for fuel switching, electrification, incumbent worker trainings. We've done a lot of incumbent worker trainings across industries in the past and would like to see opportunities there. Additionally, we were also recently awarded a grant to design and implement a training module related to EV charging station infrastructure and maintenance that we hope to make available to CivicWorks training cohorts as an optional module if that is an area of work that is of interest.
We have a question from Dr. Peters.
Hi there. Thanks. This is very interesting. How much effort are you making for worker training? Developing young apprentices to basically install various products that you mentioned. How large is that group, and how are you getting funded to do that workforce training, if at all?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in this presentation about what our training tracks are on the Center for Sustainable Careers side. I'll also talk a little bit later about our funding sources and what we kind of braid together. In terms of electrification, our efforts are, kind of limited to what I'm talking about here, but I'll certainly talk to you about some of our other green energy training tracks a little bit further in this presentation, if that's okay.
Got thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Cool. Next slide, please. So common challenges to residential electrification, just from our initial forays into this work. One is obviously project complexity. These can be complicated projects in terms of fuel switching. Electrical limitations are a big piece of this. So insufficient panel space or capacity, outdated wiring like knob and tube. And another big piece is just the coordination. So the permitting, the electrical permitting involved, as well as the coordination with the applicable utility to schedule the work and get approval for the work plans. These are steps that will significantly extend the amount of time required to proceed with a project. Another thing I really want to emphasize is that weatherization is a prerequisite for all of this. So it's really important that the funding is available to address the health and safety issues in the home that would typically result in deferral from weatherization. Those are going to be barriers to electrification as well. So mold, moisture, roofing leaks, all of that stuff I mentioned we have to think holistically about this and have a whole home approach. I will take a second to just plug CivicWorks' electrification collaboration group. So we coordinate a monthly meeting of what we call the Maryland Electrification Collaboration Group. It is an informal peer-to-peer exchange of ideas and resources for folks working on electrification projects in Maryland. So that includes community-based organizations like CivicWorks, state and local government, and folks from the private sector as well. If this is of interest to you, we're always looking for new voices to be present in the group, new attendees. Reach out to me offline, I'll get you added. Even if you can't make the meetings, can put you on the group and you'll get our like meeting minutes and resources shared. Next slide, please. And I am now going to hone in on what I mentioned a second ago, which is more the Center for Sustainable Careers side. So we believe that integrating workforce development in green energy and decarbonization is very important to ensure that there are pathways in these industries for residents who need them the most. So we train residents for clean energy careers. Next slide, please. So this is a rundown of a few of our sector-based training tracks historically. We've done residential energy efficiency and weatherization, solar panel installation, utility infrastructure and remediation. And our newest training track that we launched this year after doing a pilot cohort last year is in roofing. I will talk more about that in a bit. Next slide. This is just a visual showing the wide array of career opportunities in the solar industry. So just trying to emphasize the viability of it as a career path, and that we think that landscape of opportunity is similar in other green energy trades. Another visual, this is showing, this is not CivicWorks specific, but it's just a nice visual that shows opportunity for professional development at various stages in someone's career. And I can connect that back to a few things CivicWorks does. So on the early support front, we have a youth build program, which is a GED attainment program and also an introduction to construction trades. And the pre-apprenticeship piece of this, so our core training tracks are not technically pre-apprenticeships, but they can certainly function that way. So when someone comes through one of our training tracks, is placed with an employer, if that employer opts to, lead that trainee down the apprenticeship route, we are supportive of that. And we are interested, we don't operate any registered apprenticeships. That is potentially something that's of interest to us as we do more decarbonization work. If we have an in-house HVAC technician, if we have an in-house electrician, could we pair them with a couple, small group of apprentices? Then upskilling just is, incumbent worker trainings. Again, it's a big part of our model. Next slide, please. Yep. And so just to take a step back, think about the sociopolitical context. So we know that the criminal justice system has transformed our workforce system and the ability for residents to access employment. More Americans are arrested than ever before, and communities of color are disproportionately impacted by this through targeted policing. So a couple stats here that just show the scale of the issue for folks who are formerly incarcerated. And so CivicWorks believes that we must consider all of this through a racial equity lens. And of course, that is also part of the mandate of this group, which is called on to support formerly incarcerated individuals, as well as veterans, women, and other disadvantaged individuals. Next slide, please. I think we're probably all relatively familiar with some of these systemic employment barriers. So I'll try and go through this quickly, but obviously legal barriers, people of color being disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system, education, we have underinvestment in communities of color, In terms of hiring, we have closed recruitment networks. We have blanket bars on those with criminal records. Transportation is huge. It is very hard to be, there's a lot of jobs you simply cannot access if you do not have your own vehicle. Additionally, it can be challenging to be a dependable employee if you are reliant on public transit and have a significant commute to your job. Timeliness can be a challenge. You are dependent on public transportation. That is especially true of Baltimore, which does not, comparatively, maybe does not have quite as robust a public transit network as some other major cities. Yes, we'll power through here. Next slide, please. And why we like the green construction sector. Often there's not a lot of formal education requirements. What there are knowledge, skill, and certification requirements for entry-level workers. So that's the exact type of thing where we could integrate into our training program. So it's our goal that we're giving our trainees a leg up to access mid-level positions with higher wages upon graduation. Next slide, please. Talk a little bit about wraparound services. So we want to ensure participants can fully focus on training. So when they are with us, we are providing them with case management support, legal support, financial stipend, free meals and snacks, transportation support, laptop and Wi-Fi. And a big one is that we are giving them the tools and safety equipment that they take with them to their job upon graduation. Next slide, please. Very briefly, touch on enrollment criteria. We're trying to screen for drive, motivation, interest in the field. We want to avoid unnecessary barriers to entry, numeracy, literacy, or educational attainment requirements that are not necessarily. And again, we do have a focus on serving individuals impacted by the criminal justice system, although that is not, we have a broader scope than that in terms of our trainees. This is just touching on some of the soft skills and personal development involved. So we're trying to build work habits that lead to long-term career success. Conflict resolution, resume writing, interview skills, punctuality, goal setting. This is a photo of one of our recent roofing training cohorts with our instructor, Corinne. Certifications, pretty much every training track we offer. We are providing OSHA 30, and then we are also providing other industry relevant certifications depending on the field. Philosophy around hands-on training is that participants learn best by doing. So we are trying to use hands-on assessments to the degree it's feasible to measure competency. We'll real quickly tell you about our roofing training track. This is near and dear to my heart. This is our newest job training track. We had a pilot cohort in 2023. We launched it as an official program this year. We have 4 cohorts. We'll be graduating this year. The focus is on commercial low slope roofing. So like PPO, EPDM systems on flat roofs in the commercial market, although there's a lot of this type of roof in the residential market in Baltimore as well, since we have a lot of flat roof row homes. We have 4 employer partners in Baltimore. And so the question might be why roofing is appealing. Next step, or next slide. One, of course, it just meets all of our wage and job quality standards that the employers we're working with do in the commercial sphere. But our vision is to create an in-house roofing social enterprise within our energy programs team, with the initial product offering being reflective cool coatings. So this does a few things. It creates in-house capacity to potentially address a common reason for deferrals from our energy efficiency and weatherization, which is roofing issues. It also supports our Baltimore Shines low-income rooftop solar program. Again, if we have that capacity to do roofing repairs, that enables us to move projects forward. And 2, cool coatings on a flat roof that you're installing solar on are going to increase the effectiveness and efficiency of that PV system. And again, it creates that capacity for in-house on-the-job training specific to roofing, which, as I said, we like because it gives us flexibility in working with those trainees. Next slide.
Cindy, there are some questions in the chat. You want to address those now? Or?
So there are two questions in the chat. One is from Dr. Kayla. She says, would love to get some insights on labor intensity of solar projects industry over the long term. 2 years out, is everyone trained, still fully employed? There seems to be mixed experiences across different cities.
Yeah, and I'm not the expert on our exact retention stats from those cohorts, but I know that as an organization, we place a lot of emphasis on retention and successful placements. We're not interested in just graduating folks into giving folks the skills and then putting them into a market where there are not jobs. We have a selection of solar industry employers that we place with successfully across the program. Our Center for Sustainable Careers, our 1 year retention rate is it was 85. I think it's right around 85. It might be like 82 right now. So we take a lot of pride in that stat, but in terms of more specific figures, I'd probably want to connect offline and see what I could get for you.
The next question, thank you. The next question is from Elisa Bassnight. Would love to understand what percentage of women you see participating and graduating from your programs. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's a very good point. It is something that we as an organization, I think, are perpetually working to do a better job at. I would say that certainly a majority of our program participants are men. I don't know the exact breakdown by gender. I could see about getting that stat as well, but I will say that it is absolutely something we try and stress in our outreach, and something that we continue to work on improving. And we have some resources and materials that specifically emphasize like career paths, why these should be, of interest to people of all genders in terms of pathways. Yeah.
We got two more questions. I'm going to raise these two questions and we're going to close it off for questions because we do have another presentation and then discussion. So two questions. One comes from David Hollins. Are you aware of any changes to the Maryland Electricians Board's low voltage electrician requirements? Most electrical projects require oversight via a master electrician, limiting access to new tradesmen within the industry.
I don't have specific knowledge of that. I do know that, we've done feasibility studies in the past looking at electrical and also HVAC as something that could fit into our, standard training track model, which I already outlined. And we did assess that there were really high barriers to entry and that they don't really fit for the model of our general type of programming. Again, if we expand to look at, more of an apprenticeship format for something like that, we think there's opportunity there. But yeah, no, definitely they can be challenging industries with high barriers to entry.
Final question from the chat from Kimberly Haven, a member. Can you explain your outreach and recruiting process for women and formerly incarcerated individuals? You did already touch on some outreach and recruiting, but kind of high level.
Yeah, so for formerly incarcerated individuals, across the board, it does come back to the model of, community-based outreach. We have community outreach coordinators who meet folks where they are. Our central office for our Center for Sustainable Careers is in the Bel Air Edison neighborhood. So we are right in the community, one of the communities we're serving. And we have a lot of folks who know about us because they see the building and, so come in and learn about the programming. I don't think we I think it's known by our reputation, how long we've been around. A lot of the people are aware of what our programming is and that it is a good resource for folks with a record of incarceration or reentry population. And again, it's, those wraparound services. So we're providing case management services to the people coming in. We're going to help them if, try and get them legal assistance if we can as well. So I think these are things that we include in our marketing and also spread through word of mouth in communities. And I would say it's similar in terms of trying to recruit a diverse array based on gender in terms of folks we have coming through our programs. Again, I'm not one of those community outreach coordinators on that side. So in terms of the exact strategies, I probably want to talk more about it offline.
Thank you.
And next slide. And to wrap up here, so this is just a visual attesting to our funding, some of our current funding sources, and then some future sources we're pursuing. And next slide. Then some community and environmental impacts. You can see just, some of the figures here that we're proud of in terms of outcomes for our trainees and also outcomes for the environment. And next slide. And yeah, so that is the conclusion here. Some resources on CivicWorks, our site. Some of those Rewiring America resources are mentioned. Some info on the Empower program, which is a big component of our funding for energy efficiency and weatherization. And of course, my info, if anyone wants to connect offline, happy to talk more. And very appreciative to you, Cindy, and to the Just Transition Working Group for this opportunity to talk about CivicWorks. Thank you.
Thank you. We have some clapping hands. Some compliments, awesome work, thank you. So now,
Too far over time.
no, this is great. So next, we're going to have Mr. Casey Ross from Lorax Partnerships.
All right, thanks. And so we'll get right into it. And I'm a self-described energy nerd. So if any of these topics are interesting to anyone in the room or on the call, please interrupt me and I'd love to talk about it. So definitely a fan of the talk and discuss as we go. Yeah, so I work for Lorax Partnerships. We are a green building and healthy building and sustainability building consulting firm. We're located in Baltimore City, and we primarily work in the realm of commercial buildings, although we do some single-family homes as well. We have accreditations all throughout the building and energy performance and sustainability performance sphere, and have 1,000 green building projects under our belts right now. We work with, like I said, green buildings, health and wellness, building occupants, and various certifications to support that efforts. We do decarbonization and energy audits. We work in the sphere of sustainability planning for larger organizations and on-site environmental testing. And lastly, we wrap all that up with financial rebate and tax incentive analysis to be able to show the path forward for building owners and architects if you are doing a sustainable building and if you're building to higher energy efficiency standards. There are many programs out there right now, very local to Maryland, that will incentivize that and make doing the sustainable thing the financially sound thing. So this is a little bit about me. I'm the Director of Energy Services. I have a long history in the building industry. I started my career as a mechanical, electrical, plumbing designer, designing big, large institutional buildings, district energy, all sorts of things, and got really into energy modeling, energy audits, and looking into that sphere of the world. And now am the sustainability in the sustainability world. Licensed engineer in Maryland, and expertise in many green and sustainable building certification programs. So to start off with, what we're seeing at the forefront of sustainable buildings and energy efficient buildings in our world, specifically in the Maryland market, is in terms of clients are planning sustainability, and they're planning for sustainability. And they start with that with looking at energy audits and benchmarking their existing buildings to see how they perform. Architects and building owners are now starting to get more and more aware of things such as Climate Solutions Now Act BEPS program and being able to prepare for that. We're seeing more and more interest and much more construction in terms of renewable energy and starting a little bit into battery storage to pair with renewable energy to make that a viable financially viable construction alternative. We're doing more net zero design, and we're of course assisting our clients with incentives and rebates to make all of those books balance out. So I want to talk about a case study of a project that we do. So like I said, most of the work that I do is in the commercial sector, but this is a very interesting single family home project that we worked on recently. So this is the Fulton Avenue Homes. This is a current project that's in bids right now and should be starting to get built this fall. It's working with a developer in the city. It's off of Fulton Avenue, so it's not too far from North Avenue if you're familiar with it. This is a project that was funded in part from Bon Secours. And so this is taking existing Baltimore row homes, refurbishing them, and specifically to a net zero standard. So these are going to be net zero row homes within Baltimore City. And it needs to also be part of the affordable housing. So our task as building consultants and energy consultants was to come in and work with the developer, architect, and engineers to using energy modeling software to figure out how to most cost effectively make these row homes net zero. And part of that is saying these are affordable housing. So we want to be able to use this as a template throughout the rest of the city and have a cost-effective means of doing that. So we use modeling to analyze different mechanical HVAC equipment efficiencies, plumbing, domestic hot water efficiencies, how much insulation was being used in the roof and the walls, and how much of an effect that had on energy usage, and where we could be strategic about how this design is, again, as a template to be able to reproduce this as much as possible and give net zero homes to as many people who need it, especially on the affordable housing side. So
There's a question in the chat.
Yeah.
David Hollins, what about true zero waste certified?
Zero waste certifications, we do work with that area. That's not my expertise because that's more on the material side. But yeah, I have people that I work with who do that. These are the results from that actual project showing energy usage throughout the building by kind of on a pie chart. And you can see the two biggest slices here. One is what we sometimes call as plug loads. That's the blue. That means appliances, things that you would plug into the wall, TVs, and that's kind of an estimate as to what we would think a typical home would use. And then on the right side is the calculated analysis for heating. So there was actually the heating energy when we started making these models of high efficiency net zero homes that really dominated the energy usage. So how do we then were able to use this pie chart and say, the plug loads, we can't really change too much. That's user driven, but the heating energy, if that's what's dominating things, that's what we need to look at too. So
So just looking at that, the blue side being, the plug-in TVs, all the things that most people are going to continue to use.
Yeah.
The red being heating.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's either space and or water. I don't know what the other ones are. I can't see them. But how much of that red could potentially be reduced just by tightening up the envelope?
That's an amazing question.
Yeah.
Could you go to the next slide? So what we found is that the air leakage, tightening up the envelope, was by far the biggest factor in energy savings in single family homes. So we did a different analysis and iterations of this energy model. The bar graph on the left is what we took existing buildings and did what's called a blower door test to determine actual air infiltration rates, so the air leakage rates. And we modeled based on that of an existing building that was typical row home. And that is the energy distribution there. We can see the huge amount of red from heating on the left. And then on the right, we performed additional caulking and air sealing throughout the building, did another blower door test to find out what that new infiltration rate is, modeled that, and found a huge drop in energy rate. So air infiltration in air leakage in single family homes is the biggest driver in energy usage once you have a fairly energy efficient design. So the caveat here is this model is already using heat pump hot water heaters, is already using SEER 16 HVAC, it's already using heat exchangers, ventilation air heat exchangers to be able to reduce that load. So when you start squeezing down, the blue in this bar is for cooling. When you start squeezing down all those other loads, all those other energy sources, the infiltration becomes the dominant factor. So that's where we really, the biggest takeaway here is to be able to focus as much as possible on the construction of the building and the sealing of that. And that's a very hands-on site-specific activity.
What, no pun intended, but what energy or resources are being put in, and maybe we know this from a state level and a local level, to get mechanicals out of attics? Because the idea that you put mechanicals in attics is pretty insanely stupid, and we've been doing it for, I don't know, 50 years, how long we've been doing mechanicals in attics.
So mechanical systems in attics. So the Maryland Energy Code is getting better about that and making it harder to justify being able to do that because there are insulation requirements, specifically with ductwork.
The ductwork, yeah.
Related to that. So it's getting harder to do that, but that's probably the only thing that I've seen to be able to get.
But is it still a fairly common practice for traditional home construction?
No, I would say no.
It's not. They're finally getting away.
Yeah. Yeah, if nothing else, because of accessibility issues. Any machine you need to service at some point, and having it in the attic it's hard to get to. It's better to have it in a closet or a basement.
Yeah, I mean, my experience has been that builders like to put them in the attic because then they don't have to take away from sellable square footage.
Mm-hmm.
And so they put them in the attic, and then they just it's a very inefficient place to put them.
Yeah.
And
yeah, our experience is that it's been dropping off. That it has been dropping off, that we're not seeing that as much.
Significantly?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. And so related to building energy code, what our experience on the front lines, dealing with projects day in, day out, is that Maryland really is already a leader in progressive energy codes in the United States. So Maryland has adopted IACC 2022 and is really ahead of the curve in 2021, I think. I misspoke that. Is really ahead of the curve in terms of energy codes for new buildings in the country. Enforcement and implementation is where we're lax in very specific jurisdictions. Many are much better than others. And that's where kind of the energy falls through the cracks, is that not in the code so much, not in what's written on the paper, what happens in the actual buildings. And so it's a challenge for us in the private sector on how to advise clients in very specific locations as to how to best manage and handle their existing building stock, knowing that many things do not get enforced.
Just wanted to make a quick comment from the chat that someone lives in Virginia, or one of our NREL folks, Jonathan, and he mentioned that Virginia is like at IECC 2000.
Mm-hmm. That's that's probably correct, and that's way behind compared to Maryland. Yeah. Where we're getting a lot of this energy efficiency, where the heating is coming from, is changing very rapidly in terms of heat pumps. So heat pumps, just a quick primer into the magic behind it. You may recall from high school physics that energy cannot be created or destroyed, can only be moved around. So when we talk about heat pumps and electric heating, the old way of thinking it's called electric resistance heating. That takes however much electricity, converts it over into heat 1-to-1 at best, and then puts that into your house. Heat pumps take a much smaller amount of electricity and just use that to move heat from the outside to the inside or vice versa. So I think we have another slide after that. Yeah, so what we're seeing is the 21st century heat pumps are much, much better than previous generations. So my dad's generation has a stigma against heat pumps. Many of them have a stigma against heat pumps, dealing with some poor performances in the 60s and 70s. But just the technology of the last couple of years has radically changed how well these perform. And we're really starting to see those effects in the commercial sector. Heat pumps of 2024 produce hotter water and air temperatures than before. They can get up to 170 degrees discharge. They can operate in colder colder climates. So the outside air temperature that they're able to operate is -10 degrees as from off the shelf units. And if you get into specific locations. We have clients in Canada that get what are called hyperheat models that operate in -30. So if you have a building that's operating that you think needs to be colder than that in Maryland, we have something else to talk about. Yeah.
Who are the current leading manufacturers in that space?
The manufacturers, all of the main manufacturers of all HVAC equipment is really getting into it. So A.O. Smith is a plumbing manufacturer. We see a lot of their work. LG, Rheem gets into it. I shouldn't say all the big ones. The biggest HVAC manufacturers like Trane, they have not really gotten into the residential market. They've stayed away from that so far. But maybe they might be going.
Does Mitsubishi lead?
Mitsubishi is a good manufacturer that does well in this market.
But some of the traditional American manufacturers like Trane, they're just not there yet.
They're not there yet. They have stuff on the much larger side for commercial, but in terms of mass deploying for any kind of residential or even, multifamily apartment style sizes, they're not quite there yet.
That's a shame because it seems like a lot of the HVAC contractors are very comfortable with some of those manufacturers. And if those manufacturers aren't pulling their weight,
right,
and they're not being offered to their clients.
Yeah, and contractors don't want to take risks and they don't want to go with a name they don't really know. So here's a quick analysis. This is an example of one of the services that we provide for our clients, building owners and architects. What is the financially reasonable thing to do about my domestic hot water, the water I use for sinks and shower water? So here are two models of water heaters from A.O. Smith. That's a name I just dropped. A leading manufacturer of water heaters. So on the left is a traditional gas-fired heater. On the right is one of the heat pump water heaters. They're the same size, and these equipment prices are right from their website. So start off the bat. It's a big delta in terms of buying a heat pump water heater in terms of cost, and also it is taller. It is at least 9 inches taller, and some models get 12 inches taller. And if you have a tight basement, that's a big problem. So there's considerations there. But what's up?
Sorry, I'm going to keep asking.
Don't be sorry. I want to talk about.
Do you vent them both for incoming air and exiting air? Because basically it's kind of a bit of a dehumidifier, doesn't it?
They can be vented and
You recommend that?
it depends on the client. For single family homes and multifamily apartments, it's often not worth the trouble to vent it because that's additional ductwork and it's an additional penetration through the building. And so that's another source of air leakage.
But you could vent it to another room.
You could vent it to another room. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Or you could pull.
I'm talking water. When you said vented, I thought you meant vented to outdoors.
No, I mean, I'm thinking, almost putting like a damper on it and then in the summer doing one thing and in the winter, because it produces basically air conditioning, right? And
that's right. So water heater sucks heat from the surroundings and puts it into the water.
So if you have a kind of a moist basement, that's the best place to put it, right?
Absolutely. So in general, if you have this in your house or your apartment, in the winter, it's giving you a little bit of a penalty. In the summer, it's giving you a little bit of a benefit. And over the course of the year, that effect is kind of neutralized.
That's my question is, for times like in the winter for those applications, do you vent the exhaust because it's cold?
You can, and I've seen that done. But again, just to be able to do that effectively, you'd have to vent it outdoors. And then that's another piece of duct and another wall penetration or roof penetration. So that usually on the financial side, it just not make sense.
The labor.
For larger installations where it's more of a centralized system that serves multiple houses or multiple apartments or whatever it is, then the financials make much more sense. Then it makes then you can just duct it right over there, and it usually has its own room, and then you can do that.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So here's the quick analysis. One of the things that pops out immediately for me, in my mind, is the heat pump hot water heater. This particular model is the electrical source is 120 volt, 20 amp circuit. So what that means is that this can get plugged in. You don't need an electrician to come in here and size up 208 service. You don't need a gas fitter to come in here and plumb up some copper wires. You don't need to run a vent out of this. You just pull it in and pop it in. So the labor cost is significantly less. There's also, I'm using BG&E, but this applies to just about everywhere in Maryland. There are local utility rebates that are currently at about $1,000 per unit. And then very soon they're going to jump up to $1,600 per unit. And then the Inflation Reduction Act will take off 30% from after the utility rebate. So what you end up with is that this thing is cheaper to install than a gas heater by a good degree, percentage wise.
But do you have to have a certified or use a certified installer? Or how do you get that installed? How does
That can be based on the manufacturer's warranty. And so you might need to have a certified installer for that portion of it. But in terms of what trades you need to have, it's much less labor to do it.
But I guess what I'm saying is there's not like a list of installers. You can just have whoever.
Oh, correct. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
As long as you produce the receipt.
You just call Home Depot and tell them to do it. Yeah. They're also cheaper to operate. So a heater of this size is about 1,900 therms a year. At the top efficiency for gas, you're getting 96% efficiency. And so that then you round up to an even 2,000 therms that you need to put into it. BG&E, and again, this is similar numbers throughout our state. BG&E is about $1.75 a therm, so then it's $3,500 a year. And then if you convert that heating value in therms over directly to kilowatts, it's 56,000 kilowatts. At a coefficient of performance, how much electricity you need to move heat around, that gets down to this heat pump water heater is sipping 17,500 kilowatt hours. At 18 cents a kilowatt hour from BG&E rates, this comes out to under 3,200 a year. So it is cheaper to install, cheaper to run.
So what type of, is this expected to be a residential installation or is this a commercial installation?
This is residential.
I have one. I have one.
Oh.
And does it cost that much to run? In other words, it's like I see these are, 80 gallon
This is an
tanks.
80 gallon tank.
It's like tankless.
So this would
That
be,
that seems like
this
a
would be
very
a
high cost.
this would be
Family.
a big, large family. Yeah, family of 4 or 5 would take an 80 gallon tank. A single apartment would be more in like the 30 or 40 gallon.
Right, boom.
Yeah.
So like with my tankless and the tankless that we install, it might use, a few hundred gallons of propane a year, nowhere near $3,500 an annual cost to run it, I guess is my point.
Well, yeah, but then the equivalent in the heat pump would be a lot less too.
You're also comparing to some degree apples to oranges, right? Because that's the gas, on the left, that's gas.
Yeah.
Right. Which, I'm not saying you shouldn't compare gas, but also if you were to compare just a traditional electric resistant,
Oh, compared to electric
it would
resistance.
astronomically more.
That's right. So the electric resistance so in the heat pump makes the 56,000 kilowatt hour per year consumption drop down to 17.5. Electric resistance would be 56,000 kilowatt hours of consumption.
Right.
And thus the cost would be triple.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why I say apples to apples, right?
Yeah, so electric resistance, the cost is more like at $9,000 a year for this kind of system. And we can do analysis on gas fired instantaneous compared to a heat pump instantaneous, but I didn't have that slide. What we're seeing more and more adoption on, especially on the Eastern Shore. The Eastern Shore is very big on ground source heat pumps. So the heat pumps that I've been talking about are air source. They take heat to and from the air. These do it with the ground, which has a much more even temperature profile. The ground is always about the same temperature. And thus the efficiencies go much higher. So ground source heat pumps are the most efficient source of HVAC. Complicated technical systems can also be connected in with your domestic hot water to be able to heat up water in that way as well. And ground source heat pumps come in 2 very basic varieties. On the right, we have a horizontal field. So this is a shallow dig that has many loops of pipes to get the amount of heat transfer. On the left, it's more expensive, but more smaller square footage, where they're drilling very deep wells into the ground to be able to get the total surface area that way. Okay. And then what we're going to be seeing, hopefully in the near future, existing Maryland warmth bill addresses this, is community geothermal. So this is a type of geothermal heat pump system that we have seen already in Europe, Boston, Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, a few other different locations on the West Coast, that there is a central community building with a large geothermal plant And then that has underground piping that serves buildings throughout the community. This is not too far off in terms of just conceptually of what existing facilities in Baltimore City use. So there is a company Vicinity that runs chilled water to all the buildings downtown, and they have central plants that put very cold water in pipes underground, and that serve the big skyscrapers in the city. And then this would be a similar kind of idea where utility operated or some sort of partnership operated central plant would produce ground source heat pump water for buildings to be able to tap into and utilize that high efficiency without having to have access to a large amount of ground to be able to do it. We already talked about magnetic induction cooking, so we're just going to skip right past that. Thanks. And then what we're seeing now is for many years now, the building efficiency sector has been focused on operational carbon. We're talking about energy usage and then how that affects the grid, how that goes back to the power plant that burns carbon, fossil fuels and puts carbon into the atmosphere. And the new wave is going to be into embodied carbon. And we're already seeing pushes for this. In other municipalities, such as New York and London, are starting to roll out legislation about building embodied carbon. That is saying if a building is built, that construction incurs a certain amount of carbon emissions. So all of the concrete and steel, insulation, everything that's in the building induces carbon. And so we need to measure that and say, if we're really truly looking to reduce the amount of carbon that human activities are producing, we need to not just look at the year by year, but look at the whole lifespan of a building. If the building is going to last 100 years, the embodied carbon is not as big a deal as if you have a building that gets put up and brought down in 20. And one of the key things that we see in addressing embodied carbon is the use of mass timber construction. Oop, too fast. So on the left is the 4010 building. It's a 4-story office building in Baltimore City, and it's recently opened just a couple of months ago. And it uses mass timber to dramatically reduce the embodied carbon. So it's basically not everything is timber in there. You can see a little bit of the cast iron piping, and there's concrete in the floors, and there's other small amounts of structural steel. But we're finding ways to keep driving down the amount of carbon that is put into these buildings, and that will become an upcoming trend in building carbon reduction strategies.
Sorry, is that like an engineered wood, or what kind of timber is that?
It's an engineered wood, that's right.
And basically wood fibers glued all together and the structure.
That's right, yeah, there's no more 100-year-old oaks running around, so they have to be in that way.
And from an engineering perspective, how do they do on, I mean, they look thick, so how are they doing on?
They do, it's interesting, the thickness is more due to fire protection. So they're about half of that square footage or half of that cross section of a typical column is a sacrificial layer. And then in an event of a fire, that will burn away and char down to a certain level, leaving the load-bearing portion of the column intact.
Is a load-bearing portion of the column engineered in a different way than the
it has a
sacrificial?
different makeup in terms of how they make that composite wood, but it is still embodied. It is still wood construction.
Is it more fire resistant?
The load bearing is less fire resistant, and it just relies on the outside.
Oh, okay. So it's
the outside chars and burns a little bit, and then just only
like an insulator just to buy time.
Yeah, it's an insulated layer. It's not so much buying time; it's just the fire just won't get past a certain point. It just burns in.
Another really cool example that I just wanted to mention really quickly is Under Armour is building new headquarters in Baltimore, and I got a chance to tour the building, the structure, and they have a life cycle emissions. They used their mass timber was sourced from Europe, and it was just the actual timber, not engineered. So it does vary by structure what type of timber they use.
So they brought timber all the way from Europe here?
They did.
Most mass timber is from Germany right now, and that is because there are certain certification programs that say you have to have a renewable forest that you're taking this from. And Germany's the leader in that. Canada should have theirs next year. And so then we're going to be seeing much more North American versions of this very soon. So then federal tax incentive programs, we work with building owners and architects to be able to help them, like I mentioned, fund their energy efficiency and sustainability measures. We work with them to prove if you have it, basically it's you're having this energy efficient building, why not go after these programs? So there's the federal 45L tax credit program, which is for residential buildings. If you have a modest amount of improvement in terms of insulation, HVAC, and of course your hot water, generally you have to have that heat pump hot water to qualify. You get $2,000 a unit, apartment unit, as a tax credit. So tax credits are 1-to-1. And if it's prevailing wages, so for example, a HUD project, that jumps up to $5,000. This is all funded through the Inflation Reduction Act. And then kind of on the other side with commercial buildings, it is a 179D tax deduction that's using energy modeling, which is what I do, to get $7 per square foot tax deduction if you can prove energy savings. And if it's prevailing wages, that jumps up to $536. And then if it's a building, it's a 4-story multifamily apartment building, it qualifies for both, which is kind of a nice sweet spot. We also work with all of the Maryland utility providers in the Empower Maryland. So these are all of the different power utility distributors in Maryland. They all have this program. We work with them to provide energy models for their custom utility rebate program. And then that incentivizes building owners to design and construct more energy efficient buildings, because the modeling, which is then verified by actual utility bills, the Empower Maryland program will give the user 28 cents a kilowatt hour as a direct check back to them. That usually works out to something like 50 cents to $1.50 a square foot. And then lastly, we, as a company, we work with building owners and architects who are building in all of these municipalities around our state. If they certified their building with either the LEED program or the NGBS program, then they're eligible for different percentages of local property tax abatement. And these are generally in the 3 to 4 year range for these values here. So we kind of stack all those together and really make a compelling case financially for the majority of developers that we work with to do energy efficient, sustainable buildings. And then what we're seeing in the future is this a whole long list of green building jobs that are related to what I'm doing, and especially related to efforts of decarbonization. We see that as being 2025 is going to be the year of decarbonization for Maryland. I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. So we do have about 17 minutes left for meeting today. We did incorporate discussion along the way, so hopefully you guys felt included as we went along. But this portion of the agenda, we wanted to focus on our Just Transition Working Group member and just talk about what you see as being priorities, what you see as being challenges and opportunities. Keeping in mind our 2 deliverables, once again, of recommendations and a study to the General Assembly. And I did include a quote from Governor Moore in our agenda and here, and I'm just going to quickly read it. This is a state where the opportunities are boundless, but the challenges are undeniable. It is also a state where there's no obstacle we cannot address, no challenge we cannot tackle. From the state of the states. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. And we are prioritizing the members right now.
A member just put.
So Suzanne McCoskey from Frostburg State just asked, are there differences across prison populations in Maryland in terms of their potential for training while incarcerated? Suzanne, would you like to speak a little bit more on your questions?
Yes, I just was really impressed with the CivicWorks presentation in terms of having former workers who are previously incarcerated brought into the training programs. I'm just wondering if programs like CivicWorks find that there are certain prisons or certain prison programs that prepare them especially well for transitioning to program like CivicWorks, or are the people being reintegrated out of prison basically all they find equally capable of starting the program? In other words, does Maryland have a uniform treatment of training programs in prisons, I guess, is what I'm really saying.
Kimberly, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I've been listening to this conversation, and my mind is going towards how to get more women, and certainly formerly incarcerated individuals, but incarcerated women particularly. The programs that are available to women are just finite and not ones that will set them up to jump into jobs like CivicWorks. And I am actually familiar with CivicWorks, and I know that they have an amazing program. I think that there needs to be a more concentrated effort to do behind the walls outreach and engagement, because I know that there's an appetite for it. Funding is very limited for setting people up to make that transition back to the community. And I'm not trying to knock DOC, I'm absolutely not. I know it sounds like I am, but I'm truly not. There are limited opportunities to make that seamless transition. And, you know, if we're talking about a workforce that is untapped, then I think that there are opportunities to engage in some behind the fence strategies for outreach and engagement and training, and bring those programs in. Again, I know everybody's chasing funding dollars and they're limited, but I know that there is an interest and there's no uniformity. Arguments always come up every legislative session when I'm in Annapolis that they have to go where the greatest need is, and by numbers that's within the men's facilities. But there are women who would dive into this program, who want to get involved with it, who have families that they want to support, and who are in these communities that we serve and that want to be involved. And so I think that I'm excited about this work group, because I think maybe that narrative, that conversation is going to shift, and maybe we could actually do some training and some engagement before people are released, and then provide that seamless transition into any one of these programs.
Thank you, Kimberly. That is certainly something we can explore as we move along this working group. And we are calling on the members once again to develop recommendations, to think about challenges and opportunities, and be on the lookout for a survey. There is a question from a non-member, but we are holding off right now just for members. Larry?
So admittedly not my area of expertise, but it, as, working or reintegrating incarcerated back into the workforce, it seemed like there should be, and maybe there is better reporting, but it didn't seem like there was very good reporting on retention, what the results have been, have there been any incidents, things of that nature. Because it's one thing I feel to reintegrate into public space, if you will, but these are jobs that are going to be in residential homes. So I'm assuming that at some point they're not going to know that the person coming into their home to perform work is going to potentially have a criminal record or history, if you will. So I don't know, just better record keeping, just to see what the long-term effects of that are going to be.
Can I respond to that real quick? And I know that we're up against a thing, but also don't care. I mean, again, we're supposed to hold someone's criminal background against them if it directly relates to the job that they're doing. And so I understand that there have to be some safeguards, but this is a workforce that we're talking mostly entry-level positions. And so I think that there is a better way of doing this. And, reporting, I think, is certainly a big component to that. But also, again, if Governor Morris said you know, we're the state of second chances. We're the country of second chances. I think that we need to reframe how we're looking at some of these issues and the narratives that have been spun around this population. And I'm happy to have these conversations offline with anybody. In fact, I'll put my contact information in the chat.
We have just a few more minutes reserved for discussion. We do have at least 5 minutes reserved for public comment. Thank you, Kimberly. She put her contact information in the chat.
Hi, Cindy. Do we have any information about programs like CivicWorks in broader Maryland instead of just Baltimore?
Good question.
Programs like CivicWorks. CivicWorks is the program that I think about when I think of best practices, just because it covers so much. It covers solar, it covers energy efficiency, it covers community engagement. No other program like that immediately comes to mind. There might be other programs, but probably at smaller scales.
Just make it bigger. Then discuss.
Wonderful. Okay, so if there's no other questions or comments from members, we are going to open it up for public comments. We have someone signed up. Her name is Leah Sims.
Hi, I really wanted to respond to kind of the last two things. Kimberly, really strong statements. I happen to be a woman who's in the industry for over 2 decades, doing energy retrofits and training and all of this work related to making buildings safer, more efficient. And I want to say we had 2 wonderful presentations from 2 white men. And I think that if we want to make the industry drive the interest toward whether they're women, people of color, people from underserved communities, then we need to have more people like that who are front and center, speaking about their experiences, their wins in the industry. I recently created a course with Goodwill that was workforce development training for energy efficiency, building science, and heat pumps. It was a 4-week hands-on training course. We had 3 women in the course. One of them I've been keeping in contact with. She's found work in the industry. She's a single mother of 4 children. It's the first time that she's had a kind of a career path in I want to say in her life, really, and she's just feeling fantastic about it. And so so for that, I think that you're absolutely right. There are opportunities for women, and also on the comment about previously incarcerated and going into residential buildings. A lot of my work has been in residential buildings. I'm well connected in the contractor world. And as long as these previously, as long as their record is a non-violent offense, typically employers are comfortable with bringing them onto their staff if they have the right training, the right, I will also say, wraparound services are super important. So making sure that they have the right support to be successful when they do arrive on a job site. So that's really what I wanted to say. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Leah. The next public comment is from Jennifer Lasso Misrahi, also a Climate Change Commission member.
Thank you so much for these two wonderful presentations. I wanted to point out that as we look at full employment or as much employment as possible with an all is all framework, that there's been a lot of focus on race and place and poverty. But if you want to look at who's disproportionately impacted by climate change, it's the 700,000 plus people with disabilities who live in Maryland, 350,000 of whom are working age. This working age population has the lowest employment rate in Maryland, and there are many partners, whether it's DOORS or others through the government, that are helping get these folks jobs, different nonprofits. And it's really important to include them in this conversation. For that to happen, these programs need to be fully accessible to people with disabilities, and most of them are not. And so I sent a PowerPoint in that I hope will be shared with everyone on how to include people with disabilities in this work. Again, we're talking about 350,000 working age people with disabilities in Maryland, and they have by far the lowest employment rate of people in Maryland. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I did want to just quickly say that I'm extremely thankful for the two presentations that we heard from today. I did invite Ryan and Casey to do these presentations, and this is meant to be an inclusive working group, no matter your gender, no matter your race. So we are going to be just keeping in mind to be respectful towards one another as we move along. And we are trying to be as inclusive as possible regarding all the various different populations out there. But people with disabilities is not one of the priorities for this particular working group. So I will be sharing the meeting materials, but stay tuned on future materials to be shared as well. And we are at time. Thank you so much, everyone. Please be on the lookout for a recording and meeting minutes of this meeting. And our next meeting will be likely just virtual. It will be on June 28th. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.